Was Julius Caesar a hero or a tyrant? He didn't crown himself. He didn't need to. Julius Caesar rewrote what power looked like with mercy as a weapon, law as theater, and loyalty as spectacle. He crossed a sacred river, claimed to save the Republic, and left behind an empire. Some called him a savior. Some called him a king. But the truth, he was the mirror Rome couldn't look away from. And when the knives finally fell, it wasn't just Caesar that bled, it was everything Rome said it believed in. So today we ask, was Julius Caesar the last guardian of liberty or its most seductive executioner? You're watching Shadows of Ancient History, where we explore the forces that shaped the entire history of the Roman Empire. And this is the story of a man who ruled without a throne and became the ghost every empire still fears. The Republic cracks and Caesar crosses. It began with a coin and ended with a knife. The Roman Republic was unraveling, not from war abroad, but from rot within. The Senate, once the proud steward of Roman law, had become a stage for the elite. Bribes whispered louder than votes. Generals raised private armies. The poor flooded the streets, and grain riots lit the nights. The world's greatest republic had become a performance of power, not its protector. Into the slow collapse stepped Gaius Julius Caesar. He was not yet a tyrant, nor yet a savior, but he was watching. Born into a patrician family fallen from wealth, Caesar rose not through inheritance, but through charisma, calculation, and relentless ambition. He charmed the people, outwitted senators, and climbed the ranks of politics while building a loyal following in the shadows. His conquests in Gaul weren't just military, they were marketing. Each victory fed his legend. And then, in 49 BCE, came the order. The Senate, under the influence of his old ally turned rival Pompey, commanded Caesar to disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. He had served his term. His power, they said, must now end. He stood at the edge of the Rubicon River, Rome's sacred boundary. To cross it with his army was treason, a death sentence, a declaration of civil war. Caesar crossed. Alea iacta est, he murmured. The die is cast. He marched south with minimal resistance. Cities opened their gates. Many soldiers defected. Pompey, unprepared, fled east. Caesar entered Rome not with violence, but with calculated control, or so he framed it. But his conquest was not just of land, it was of perception. He began minting coins on them, his own image. Beneath it, a single word, clementia, mercy, a message to friend and foe. He was not here to punish, he was here to heal. It is a lesser-known irony that Caesar, in these early days, spared many of his enemies. He invited them back into public life. He pardoned senators who had armed against him. He called it reconciliation. Others called it submission through performance. Historians still debate whether Caesar's march on Rome was an act of necessity or naked ambition dressed in nobility. To many of his soldiers, he seemed like the only man left who got things done. To the Senate, he was a wolf in a borrowed toga. To the people, he was bred in spectacle, a man who at least did something. But the line between reformer and ruler was already blurring. When he pursued Pompey to Greece, the war turned brutal. At the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BCE, Caesar's legions, fewer in number but seasoned and terrifyingly loyal, crushed the senatorial forces. Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was betrayed and beheaded by the young pharaoh's advisors. When Caesar arrived and was presented with Pompey's severed head, he reportedly wept, publicly. Some say it was grief, others say it was political theater. Either way, the message was clear. Caesar's mercy had limits, and so did his enemies' honor. Modern viewers may see echoes here, in leaders who claim they have no choice but to act, who frame ambition as rescue, who cross lines not to destroy order, but to save it from the chaos they quietly helped create. Caesar didn't destroy the Republic in one night. He made it irrelevant, one coin, one march, one pardon at a time. The general who became a god. Rome feared kings, but followed tyrants in togas. When Caesar returned to Rome victorious, he came not with a crown, but with silence. No army paraded through the streets, no grand pronouncement. Instead, the Senate met quietly, humbly, and bestowed upon him the title, Dictator Perpetuo Dictator for life. It was meant to stabilize the case, to end the cycle of civil war. It ended something else instead. Caesar accepted the title as if it were a burden, not a coronation. He sat in a gilded chair in the Senate, wore the purple-trimmed toga reserved for triumphs. He moved through Rome with the spectacle of a monarch, at times carried in litters, like a living god. And yet no crown ever touched his head. He didn't need one. He ruled through symbolism and saturation. Caesar was everywhere, his image on coins, his words in law, his face etched into statues still warm from the sculptor's hand. And then he restructured the calendar. The Roman lunar system was chaotic and easily manipulated by priests for political purposes. So Caesar, advised by the Alexandrian astronomer Sosigenes, created a 365-day solar calendar with a leap year every 4 years. The Julian calendar. It would govern time itself and still does. To the people, Caesar gave land, grain, festivals, debt relief, and spectacle. To his soldiers, land and citizenship. To the provinces, order and justice, often more than they had ever received from a distant Senate. But to the Senate, he gave a warning. He expanded their ranks from 600 to 900, filling the seats with loyalists from across the empire, non-Roman Italians, Gauls, even provincial elites. Rome's core aristocracy was diluted. The Senate had more men than ever before, and less power than ever in its history. Lesser known among his reforms was his move to abolish half of the corrupt tax farming system, which had enriched the wealthy at the expense of the poor. In Egypt, Asia, and Gaul, local administrators were replaced by equestrians, loyal to him outsiders to old Rome, but effective. Caesar wasn't just ruling over Rome, he was redesigning it. Was it justice? Was it revenge? Historians are split. Some see a visionary who understood Rome could no longer be run like a city-state. Others see a man weaponizing reform to dismantle rivals and eliminate accountability. His laws helped the common people, but also neutralized the last checks on his power. One public gesture shocked even his allies. In early 44 BCE, Caesar had the month of Quintilis renamed in his honor, Julius. It would sit forever in the calendar, the sun crossing over it once a year. Even time now marched to Caesar. He also appointed magistrates without elections, sat above consuls, spoke before everyone in the Senate, and made it known that if Rome needed anything, it needed him. Modern parallels abound. Leaders who rule by exception just for now until the crisis passes, who expand institutions but hollow them out, who call themselves servants of the people while making themselves irreplaceable. Caesar, in his own words, claimed to restore the republic. But if so, it was a republic with one voice, his. And though the people cheered and his reforms brought stability, an old fear began to rise ancient, buried deep in Roman memory. The fear of kings. A crown offered and the crowd watched. On Caesar's statue, someone scrawled one word, Rex. It was an act of vandalism, a whisper carved in stone. But in Rome, words had power, and this one had history. Rex, king. Romans loathed kings. The very republic had been born in rebellion against one. For centuries, Rome defined itself by what it was not, a monarchy. The idea that one man could wield divine right over others was not just un-Roman, it was sacrilege. And yet, the signs were accumulating. Caesar had eclipsed every office, dictator for life, Pontifex Maximus, consul, tribune, father of the fatherland. His likeness replaced gods and temples. Senators stood as he entered, breaking centuries of protocol. His portrait adorned coins while he lived, a gesture normally reserved for the dead or the divine. Then came the Lupercalia festival, February 44 BCE, a strange primal celebration, half religious rite, half-street carnival. At its climax, in front of a roaring crowd, Mark Antony approached Caesar on the speaker's platform. In his hand, a golden crown. He offered it. Twice. Twice, Caesar refused. The crowd was confused. Some cheered, some fell silent. To those watching, it was performance. But whose? Antony's, testing the water? Caesar's, feigning modesty? Or both in a script they had rehearsed? The message was murky, but the reaction was clear. The Senate bristled. Days later, a diadem, a royal headdress, was found atop a statue of Caesar on the Capitoline Hill. It was quickly removed by 2 tribunes of the plebs, who were then punished by Caesar for their action. That act pierced the illusion. He had not asked for a crown, but when someone removed one from his likeness, he had them silenced. A lesser-known fact: shortly before his death, the Senate decreed that Caesar would sit on a throne during their sessions. Not a bench, not a consul's seat, a gilded, elevated throne. To his supporters, he was already a king in all but name. To his enemies, he was proving it day by day. Historians still debate whether Caesar wanted the crown or merely wanted the people to want it for him. Was it hesitation or strategy, humility or manipulation? And beneath the politics, a deeper tension. The Republic was no longer functional. Its elections were rigged, its magistrates corrupt, its provinces chaotic. Caesar was the only thing keeping the machine from stalling completely. But in solving the problem, had he become the problem? Modern viewers may recognize this dilemma. A leader rises, promising to cut through the mess, to restore function, to fix what no one else can. The system is broken. The laws are slow, the crisis is real, and so temporarily power is centralized, then normalized, then permanent. Rome in 44 BCE stood at that edge. Caesar had crossed so many lines so carefully that no one could tell where the Republic ended and his empire began. He wore no crown, but everyone could see the outline. The day Rome stabbed its reflection, the Forum was quiet, too quiet for betrayal. March 15, 44 BCE, the Ides of March, a day already marked by ritual and myth, but now written in blood. Caesar had been warned. A seer had whispered, "Beware the Ides." Calpurnia, his wife, had begged him not to go haunted by dreams of his murder. That morning, thunder echoed over Rome. His physician advised him to stay home. He went anyway. To the Senate, to the theater of Pompey, a cruel irony, since the building honored the very man Caesar had once chased and defeated. It was not the Senate house that day, but a borrowed space under marble columns and painted ceilings. There, beneath statues of old guns and dead men, 60 conspirators waited. They did not all hate him. Some had once followed him into battle. Some owed their status to his reforms. Men like Brutus and Cassius were not strangers to Caesar. They were his friends, or had been. They called themselves liberatores, the liberators. And their plan was not just to kill Caesar, but to kill the idea of Caesar. Before he became king, before the Republic died in ceremony, the attack began suddenly. Tullius Cimber approached with a petition. As Caesar waved him off, the first blade flashed, perhaps Casca's. Caesar turned, stunned. Others closed in. The room exploded in chaos. Robes tangled, chairs overturned. Marble echoed with screams. He was stabbed 23 times, according to Suetonius. Only one wound to the chest was likely fatal. Only one wound was fatal. A lesser-known detail. Some wounds were in his back, others in his chest, but most were superficial. Caesar did not die from any single strike, but from the collapse of trust, the shattering of alliances, the freezing silence that fell when he saw Brutus raise his hand. Et tu, Brute. We don't know if he said it. Some historians claim he did. Others believe the phrase was later added by poets, playwrights, and the ghosts of Rome's conscience. But whether whispered or imagined, those words echo through time. They are not just betrayal, they are recognition. Rome had not killed a tyrant. It had stabbed its mirror. and the mirror shattered. The assassins emerged, drenched in blood, expecting cheers. Instead, the streets stood still. The people did not celebrate. They did not praise liberty's return. They mourned. Caesar's body was left on the Senate floor. A few days later, Mark Antony stood at his funeral and lit the match. Literally, he raised the bloodied toga, read Caesar's will aloud, revealing that Caesar had left generous gifts for every Roman citizen. Public parks, grain stipends, even lands. Then Antony pointed to the corpse. The crowd erupted. They burned the funeral platform, rioted through the streets, tore apart the houses of conspirators. Some carried torches. Others held statues of Caesar, weeping openly. What the assassins saw as heroism, the people saw as homicide. Historians still debate, did the liberators save the Republic or kill the last man who could have preserved it? And if they failed, was it because Caesar was too powerful or too beloved? Modern echoes are eerie. When rulers fall not from elections but from betrayal, what rises from the vacuum? Do systems heal, or do they ossify around memory, myth, and revenge? The day Caesar died, the Republic did not rejoice. It gasped, because power doesn't die in silence. It mutates. The ghost that became an empire. They killed the man and crowned the legend. Caesar's body had barely cooled before his myth began to burn. In the days after the Ides, Rome entered a state of spiritual shock. The Senate tried to stabilize the situation, granting amnesty to the assassins, hoping to contain the unrest. But something irreversible had been set in motion. Caesar's death did not bring clarity, it brought a vacuum. And into that void stepped a boy. Gaius Octavius, only 18, Caesar's grandnephew and, as it turned out, adopted heir. In his will, Caesar had made it official. Octavius was now Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. The name alone gave him power, but Octavian wielded it with terrifying grace. He arrived in Rome quietly, without legions at first, but with growing influence. And something far more dangerous, acclaim. Son of Caesar, grandson of Venus, heir to the legacy of the man who had redefined Rome. And then, the skies complied. During the Ludi Victoria Caesaris Games held in Caesar's honor, a comet streaked across the Roman sky. Bright, blazing, unmistakable. The people stood in awe. Priests proclaimed it the soul of Caesar, ascending to the heavens. He was now Divus Julius, the divine Julius. Octavian was no longer just an heir. He was son of a god. With divine sanction, Octavian formed the Second Triumvirate, with Antony and Lepidus legally empowered to hunt Caesar's enemies. Their goal, vengeance. Their method, terror. Lists of enemies were drawn, prescriptions announced, lands seized, allies betrayed. The Republic, if it still functioned at all, had become little more than political theater. At the Battle of Philippi, 42 BCE, the conspirators were crushed. Brutus and Cassius took their own lives. The liberators had not liberated anything. They had only cleared the path for something much more permanent. But Octavian did not share power for long. Slowly, methodically, he pushed out Lepidus. Then, in a final showdown at Actium, he defeated Antony and Cleopatra, securing not just Rome, but Egypt, grain, wealth, and the gods themselves. In 27 BCE, Octavian became Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Officially, he rejected titles of monarchy, called himself princeps, first among equals, restored the Senate in name, played the role of humble servant. But the Republic was dead, and from its corpse, Augustus built an empire that would last for centuries. An empire whose foundations and flaws would shape the entire history of the Roman Empire. A lesser-known detail, the title Caesar became more than a name. It became an office. Emperors who followed Tiberius, Nero, Hadrian, all bore the title Caesar. Even after his bloodline ended, the word endured. Across time, it traveled. To the Germans, Kaiser. To the Russians, Tsar. To the world, a symbol of total power cloaked in tradition. Historians continue to debate, did Caesar intend this? Was Augustus completing a vision or correcting a mistake? Would Caesar, had he lived, have ruled as ruthlessly? Or was he the necessary chaos before the calm? And perhaps more haunting, could the Republic ever have been saved? Modern viewers may feel the shiver of recognition. A man rises amid crisis. He promises order. He silences dissent. He redefines institutions, rewrites tradition, remakes reality. And when he dies, his name is not buried. It becomes the crown. Caesar died without a crown. But from that moment on, every ruler wore his shadow. Cliffhanger close. They called him a savior. Others called him a king. And some, simply feared how much of themselves they saw in him. Julius Caesar didn't kill the Republic in one stroke. He didn't have to. He hollowed it out ritual by ritual, law by law, until all that remained was the theater of freedom, and a Senate too afraid to speak its lines. He offered mercy, delivered order, and accepted worship in everything but name. He wore no crown, but he didn't need one, because Caesar understood the deepest law of power. You don't have to take control if people are willing to give it to you. In the end, they tried to kill the man, but by then it was too late. He had already become something far more dangerous. A myth, a method, a mirror. And long after his body turned to ash, the world kept looking into that mirror and choosing to follow the reflection. So we ask again, was it patriotism that bled on the Ides of March, or just the next act in an old play? Because what Caesar left behind wasn't just an empire. He left behind a template, one we still recognize. And this story, it doesn't end here. In the next episode of Shadows of Ancient History, a new Caesar rises. And this time, the crown doesn't need to be offered, because the people are already kneeling.